I see that everybody in the crowd is a little tired, but this is going to be a very exciting panel discussion that we've planned. So I'll quickly take some time to introduce the panelists. We have three esteemed guests over here. Dr. Vritti is already on the stage. Dr. Vritti is a longevity entrepreneur. Her work focuses on cancer, hormones, and aging. Please join me in welcoming her as a panelist for this session. We have Dr. Brian Kennedy, who is the director of the BioEcho Asia Center for Reproductive Longevity and Equality at the National University of Singapore. Please welcome Dr. Kennedy. And we have with us Dr. Ramray Bhat, who is a professor at IISc, and his research focuses on reproductive aging and the link between cancer and metabolism. All right, thank you so much for joining this panel discussion. And I would like to start with a fact that I read while prepping for this panel that apparently pet longevity has been more funded than reproductive longevity worldwide. I didn't know that. And while we all love the dog aging project, I think we have to talk to them about how to get more funds here. So the focus of this discussion is going to be how to get more people interested in the space of reproductive longevity and hormonal health. So starting off the discussion, Dr. Kennedy, I think this is fantastic that there is a whole center established for reproductive longevity at the NUS. We would like for you to tell us about what is the focus areas of research that's happening at the NUS and at this center, and what kind of early trends are you observing for the Asian population specifically?
Sure. I think that, first of all, I just echo your thoughts that funding is woefully inadequate for reproductive aging. And it's, when you look back at it, it's one of those things that you say, why did this happen? Because we know, especially in female reproductive aging, that early ovarian decline is a major contributor to postmenopausal outcomes, not to even talk about fertility. And so this has been obvious in the literature and yet extremely underfunded. And I think it's part of a bigger problem, which is that female issues are just generally underfunded relative to male issues. But we were very fortunate because there was a foundation, the BioEcho Foundation, and Nicole Shanahan, who provided a large amount of funding for us to start this Asian Center for Reproductive Longevity and Equality. She had originally also funded the Buck Institute's program on this, and then after that became the vice presidential candidate for RFK. So I don't know, I don't want to comment on that. But she's done a lot for the field, and I think it's important how she named it, not just reproductive longevity, but equality, because she viewed it as a situation of how do we level the playing field for women in early adulthood. Lots of challenges trying to compete with men in the workforce, and at the same time trying to think about raising a family. Everything is in a very compacted period of time, and if fertility could be extended, that would give women more options about when they would want to have their family versus their careers. And so I think her view on it was from that perspective. Singapore wants more babies. And I think I was very interested in the postmenopausal outcome. So we have a very strong preclinical research program. I can tell you about a little bit more of it later, but it goes from, we're studying geroprotectors in mouse models, and we can talk about that. And then we have people working on improving IVF effectiveness, and a lot of human clinical association studies that really try to address this last thing you brought up, which is what's different about Asian populations, and how do we tailor approaches to improve fertility and reproductive longevity in Asian populations.
That's fantastic. So, Dr. Vritti, moving on to you, we know that in India, research is very, very less on female reproductive health, female cancers, and a lot of things, are underfunded. So, from a clinical perspective, what do you think are some of the core critical research areas for the Indian population that are missing, and where do we need to focus on, and some of the work that you've been doing? Could you throw some light on that?
Sure. So one thing that definitely needs attention is when when you study data, when you want to go through longitudinal studies, talking about onset of perimenopause. What has been striking is whatever data says, it says that obviously there is a trend change in Indian population where perimenopause is setting in earlier, which is like in late 30s and early 40s. That's when it is setting in. Now, what's leading to that? Obviously, there is a compounding factor of, again, the studies are so fragmented and so localized. And I mean, when you consider the span and the size of our country and population, they are abysmal, So, well, whatever studies have been done, they show something which is very alarming, which is the anti-Mullerian hormone, which is AMH, which is also a surrogate marker for ovarian function. There is a precipitated decline in early 30s in Indian women as compared to their Western cohorts. Now, have we studied the entire population? No, we don't have the right sample size, but this is what is appearing. Obviously, what it also talks about, I mean, what is again gives a lot of attention to what you just said, in terms of instead of looking at just fertility as one segment, we need to look at hormonal health span because hormonal health span is related to the woman's health span overall. So I think there's a lot of work that needs to happen in this portion, and you know, and I'm sure PPPs, those kind of research where public and and private both partners can come along. I think that's the way to go. Is what I look at.
Yeah. So we talked about population from a perspective of human research, and now you mentioned that AMH is specifically in the Indian population goes down much earlier. So that brings me to Ramray, where your work focuses mostly on metabolism, cancers, and aging of the reproductive organs. What do we know about metabolism and aging of the reproductive organs? Specifically, what is the new research that's coming out? What was not known? Could you shed some light on that, please?
Yeah, sure. Am I audible? Yeah, yeah. Am I audible?
Yeah.
Yeah, clear. Awesome. Just checking. Yep. There's a lot of work that's coming out, but probably just echoing what was told. It's not coming at the right pace. It's not coming at the pace it should come at. Again, because the underfunding, women's health in general, women's reproductive health being such an important socio-political issue should have come out even more. Now, as far as the drivers of ovarian functional decline is concerned, it's again, maybe a part of a reason for that is the fact that it's an incredibly difficult organ. It's a kind of a confluence of where environment comes in so many different ways, such as was also discussed in the talk previously, along with the complexities of human and especially women's developmental program, and then of course the whole physiological program. So all of these programs come together and collide, and that's where the metabolic influences within the body, that from the endocrine, that from reproductive endocrine, non-reproductive endocrine, and even the microbiome's influences, all of them come together, and that confounds some of the studies that lead us towards building a framework. So while we have a lot of data that comes out through multi-omic studies, what we are lacking are sort of multi-scale conceptualizations of all these data and how they can be structured to give rise to a conceptual understanding of what is leading to decline. Some of it, of course, comes under the PCOS research umbrella, but beyond that is something which is a dark matter to be looked at.
Yeah. So, Dr. Ryan, you mentioned that there are a lot of exciting projects that are going on at the center. I wanted to ask you specifically about the ovarian biology and senescence research that's happening there. And Ramray, maybe you can also pitch in on what's happening here. What are some new exciting projects which would be, I know the focus areas, one of the focus areas is translational research, so that you do the research and it gets out very quickly. So what are some of those projects that are happening at the center?
Well, I think there's two translational components that we're excited about. One is applying geroprotectors, which were identified to extend the lifespan of the organism, typically systemic aging, in the context of ovaries. And research has come out from many labs showing that most of these geroprotectors, at least in preclinical models, and mice are very different from humans when it comes to ovarian decline, so to keep that in mind, but at least in animal models, AKG, metformin, rapamycin, NAD precursors, all of them extend fertility, improve sex hormone production in animals, and this suggests that two things. One is that if you're affecting aging systemically, you might affect aging of the ovaries, but it also, you can turn that around and say some of the benefits of these geroprotectors may be because they protect the ovaries, and then you get systemic benefits that derive from that. And so the question, how do you take these preclinical studies that we and others are doing and apply that in human intervention studies? And one of the exciting things that's happening at Columbia, where Yushin Saw is leading a clinical study to look at rapamycin in women that are trying to preserve hormone levels in their 30s and 40s. So these are not women that are trying to get pregnant. Rapamycin might be a challenge during development, but the idea is to put women on rapamycin and see how that affects measures of fertility. And it looks to be, so far, it's a small study so far, but it's a safe intervention that looks to have potential efficacy. So this might lead to a whole range of new therapies you could have for when, even if they want fertility, maybe to treat for geroprotectors for a period of time, and then do IVF or try to undergo fertility in a normal way and see if that enhances the rate. So I'm excited about that. And I just mentioned one more thing, and that's the work of Rong Li at the university. And so she's been able to do this really cool experiment where you can dissociate eggs from granulosa cells and then reconstitute them in vitro and see what happens to the egg and put the egg back in and see if it, in an animal, can produce an offspring. And she's found that, you know, if you take young granulosa cells and put that with an old egg and reconstitute, that restores the egg. This is a really exciting experiment, and it has many potential translational outcomes, one of which is that you could take these granulosa cells in the context of IVF when you have eggs that are not optimal and maybe rejuvenate those eggs for implantation. So that, I think, has a lot of potential translational avenues, and we're really excited about that research.
Wow, that's fantastic. Ramray,
Just to add, you know, since people like Rong Li have taken the lead and are doing it at such a formidable scale. For example, when we wanted to start at looking at making models of trying to do reproductive physiology, pathology, and the biology of aging, we stayed clear from ovaries because it's just the lead taken and the research that Brian mentioned was just simply inspirational. So we are focusing on the fallopian tube, which is almost as important in terms of being a part of the entire reproductive system. And what we are trying to look at is the aging of the fallopian tube, which takes the oocyte, the fertilized oocyte, from the ovary to the uterus. And we are trying to look at, for instance, how aging within these fallopian microenvironments might predispose towards, for instance, ovarian cancer, which is now well known to originate from this origin.
yeah. So we talked about some new therapies coming out, and so I'm going to move the focus towards a clinical perspective and ask Dr. Vritti about when people come to the clinic for fertility treatments, they're looking for any magic pill, right? So they're looking for stem cell therapies, hormone therapies, anything that you can give them. What kind of therapies today are being offered in the clinics, and how effective are they? How safe are they? What is being offered to young versus old? Is there any research on that? And is there any distinction between, okay, if there are older women, maybe this will be more effective or not? Do you have any perspectives on that?
Okay, I'll try to attempt it. So, very complex question though. But okay, so I think, I mean, while my mainstay would always, I mean, I'm a prevention uh, enthusiast completely. So the mainstay still stays prevention, which is like, I mean, your 20s, when the metabolic changes are setting in, pre-pubertal, rather pubertal, so that's when the things are setting in. Giving and analyzing the risk factors for metabolic problems, then, be it be your thyroid profiles, be it be your obesity, be it be your, the chances of PCOS, having all them corrected and reversed well in time by, if you have to give a low dose DHEA, if you have to give a, small dose of HRT, which can be given as early as late 20s. I think that's where, the magic is, if somebody is seeking a magic, Having said that, obviously, there is now bioidentical HRTs are there which are being given to women, and obviously everything else has to place in order. There is no one recipe. I mean, there's no one ingredient to the recipe. It has to be the medical part of it, which is, you can give hormones, you can do egg freezing, all of that, but that has to be all combined with a robust lifestyle wherein, you have to have your regulated cortisol levels. Your lifestyle, your exercising becomes very, very critical because that keeps it regulated. Your insulin levels have to stay low. What you eat, is very, very critical. Your diet is very critical. Sleep, circadian rhythms, the role of melatonin, early morning melatonin,
Sounds
there
like a
is.
lot of work.
Yeah, that is why I said, I'll attempt it. I'll try to, attempt the laundry list. And then there are supplements like magnesium, zinc, coenzyme Qs, all of these, which have a fair amount of role. And then when we've taken care, we've set the ground, and that's when, the results are better when you do the actual, it could be, you could be doing an egg freezing after, I mean, because egg freezing is not the end of the story. The idea is to be able to implant and create an embryo out of that egg and convert into pregnancy. If all this is not done right, and that is where the success rates are very clearly, again, lack of studies in India. But what it shows is if you do, I mean, if you've done egg freezing earlier in the age where the quality of the eggs is better, the ovarian function is better, which is lesser the age, more closer to your 20s, more close, and then that is 1 decade, then 30 to 35. If it is done lesser than 35, the chances are like 45 to 55%. But if it is done later, which is in 40s, then the chances drop to around 20%, is what the studies say.
So, while you're on the big laundry list of things to be done for that entire process, hormone replacement therapies are becoming very, very popular for fertility, right? And for also anti-aging therapies. What do you think are some of the implications of these therapies from a perspective? You have a background in cancer, right? So I'm coming from that angle. What do you see in the clinical perspective where HRT is becoming so popular? What does it imply on subsequent cancer development?
So see what the studies again that was done, one major study, I mean back in my medical college when I was doing my gynae, OBGYN, HRT was the right thing to do, and then suddenly a study came up, HRT causes breast cancer, nobody talking about HRT. It changed the whole landscape and deprived so many women.
I agree.
Very, very sad. Very, very sad, And then now when, people are, uncovering whatever went wrong in that study. I mean, there are a lot of podcasts now available online. Not a hidden fact anymore. What you realized was at that time, bioidentical HRTs did not exist. They were not used for the study. So today you have an advantage of bioidentical HRTs. And again, the mode of administration. Today you have estrogen patches available, which wasn't there. For progesterone, you have ointments and creams that are available. So there are better substitutes available. Obviously, has to be in a monitored environment because, again, it has to be tailor-made. There is no one size that will go into fit all. It has to be based on the metabolic stage of the woman, the exact ovarian function, because it has to start in perimenopause. You don't have to wait. I mean, if you're 70 and you're talking about HRT, it doesn't make sense, So it has to start in a perimenopausal period. So having said that, okay, yes, there is a relatively higher risk for breast cancer. So you have to keep it monitored. But again, whatever I studied, whatever I find is the pros of HRT are way above than that relatively higher risk of breast cancer. So obviously where there is a woman at high risk of breast cancer, any which ways we're talking about annual screenings. If early detected, you know what to do. So that's my take on HRTs.
If I could just add from the
I
perspective
was
of
coming to
aging, it's, and I'm not an MD, so that's nice. I can say whatever I want. So. But, when you look back at this data, it feels like a whole generation missed this therapy. And this caused a lot of problems. There's certainly contraindications for HRT, and you consult doctor, and all of those things should be done. But I think for the majority of women, if you look at lifespan versus health span. Women live longer, but they're not necessarily healthy longer. And I think a lot of that can be attributed to postmenopausal outcomes, because men, androgens are going down slowly, but there's not this abrupt drop off. And I think that has a big impact. So I think for the majority of women, if done correctly, HRT is probably going to help them later in life.
Fantastic. So, Ramray, coming to you, so we know that there's a lot of link between hormones, cancer, and aging as well. From a cellular perspective, what do we know about hormones influencing different different types of hormones influencing development of cancers, and what does that mean for fertility preservation? Could you maybe talk about that a little? Because a lot of people come to the clinic who have cancers, and they're looking for fertility preservations and undergoing therapies of certain kinds. And we know that chemotherapies can induce senescence, can have all sorts of inflammation in the body, and then, the deal. So.
Right. Yeah. So I think again the the focal word here comes down to again metabolism, which stands as a node where all of these the chemotherapy, cancer progression, fertility therapy, all of them seem to converge, and we still are yet to get a very clear understanding of that. I think just bounding off a couple of things that were mentioned earlier, the ovary is also, and of course the reproductive tract is also a place where there's an immense contribution of sugars. Now, these sugars are not part of metabolism, but they are part of the structure of cells. They're part of the hormones. And we know, for example, with aging, a lot of hormones which would have sugars on the surface, these sugars tend to drop off. We know that follicle-stimulating hormone, for instance, tends to get deglycosylated. Again, echoing the talk that was given before on the beta-glucuronidase. We're still coming to terms with understanding the glycobiology of cancer and how that affects organ function. And I think, again, a frontier of where reproductive research will go towards, and looking at the convergence of ovarian decline and ovarian cancer, for instance, will be at the frontier of trying to understand how glycobiology pans out with aging.
Yeah, yeah.
So, what we do in cancer practice typically is, and one thing that we should have more and more is gynae, onco, not gynae onco, but oncology obstetrics clinics. Obviously, because there is a fair amount of role before you put the woman on chemotherapy or radiotherapy, doing egg freezing for her. So that is one thing that should be done and which is being done. But yes, less people know about it because so what you have to do is you stimulate the ovaries, you get it early because you can't wait for the whole cycle to work because you want to start your chemotherapy and radiotherapies. So you stimulate the ovaries, and there are several kinds of hormones that you can stimulate ovaries with. So there are with the estrogen sensitive ones, there are different set. For estrogen non-sensitive ones, it's straightforward. Then you have another option that you could do. So one is egg freezing. Second thing that you could do is you could do total GnRH suppression. So you suppress the ovarian function. So when you suppress the ovarian function, and once the therapy is over, you can resume back. So, and there is 70 to 80% chance that the lady would resume her normal menstrual cycle. And again, but the outcome of pregnancy and fertility is multifactorial.
So in the interest of time, I'll pose one last question to Dr. Kennedy. We had a talk by Dr. Furman. He was talking about the effects of space radiation, and we're all planning to go to space in the near future. What are some of the futuristic technologies that are being researched at NUS? Is it IVF, IVG, assisted reproductive technologies? Tell us a little bit about that. And are we ready for freezing eggs and taking them to space?
Yeah.
Taking them to space.
Yeah.
Eggs in space, it's interesting. I haven't thought about it much yet. The way the world's going, we may need to get some there as soon as possible.
Yeah.
I think that there's this field has really just exploded. And so there's a lot of technologies that you hear about that are in their nascent stages that can really have a tremendous potential to do good. And I can just tell you one more thing that one of the things I'm always thinking about is how do we interface what we know about aging into some actionable outcome. And one of the things we're doing right now is we're number one, testing whether people that respond better to cancer have a lower biologic age at the time of diagnosis than people that respond less well. And then as a corollary to that, we're taking like breast cancer diagnosis, where you have like a 6-week window typically before you have surgery. And we're asking the question, if we do a abrupt lifestyle change toward a healthy longevity during that window, exercise, diet, can we improve the outcome of the surgery or reduce the chemotherapeutic risk? And so I think there's, I look at the world through aging, but I think that there's a lot of ways that we can take aging biology now and apply it in ways that are not just affecting health span, but are useful in the clinic in terms of clinical outcomes. And that's something we're really looking into.
One thing just for the, to alarm the audience how it is, your onset of age of your perimenopause is inversely proportional to the chances of you getting gynecological cancers.
Yeah.
Now, I mean, that just takes, and fertility is one of those problems in that whole gambit.
Yeah. Okay, I think we can open it up for some questions from the audience at this point. There's one over there.
Hello, good evening. I'd like to know your experiences about the role of regenerative therapies for reproductive aging, like ovarian aging, premature menopause, perimenopause, injections of PRP, or bone marrow activated stem cells. Have you had um, any experiences with cell-based therapies? Also,
Therapies have been done.
PRPs, I know
Yeah.
they don't offer much, but BMAX, like bone marrow, I'd also like to know if Dr. Brian Kennedy, have you had any experiences just looking at how it's in the West? Because in India, still not approved, and we're just in the very experimental phases using autologous BMAC. So, do you have any thoughts about it, Doctor?
Yeah, do you want to start first? Yeah, I think it's an interesting technology. As was said, PRP has been done. Also, there are places in Malaysia I know of where you're injecting MSCs into ovaries directly, which is an interesting, I'm not sure I would go for that, but it's an interesting idea. I think we need a lot more research in that area to try to understand what the potential benefits might be. Theoretically, I can say, there's a conceptual argument for why that might be beneficial, but there are also potential risks associated with it. And unfortunately, the regulation is so variable around the world that it's very hard to find locations where that's done. And even in many cases, the doctors that are doing it, they don't want to aggregate their data and publicize it because they're afraid that will invoke regulation that will stop them from being able to do it. So there's a lot of challenges with that. I think conceptually it's an exciting idea, but I can't point to any data that shows efficacy right now. And then even beyond that, you have to ask, do you do it autologous or allogenic, or where do you get the stem cells from? What kind of stem cells? There are lots of interesting unanswered questions there. Unfortunately, I don't have the answers.
Hi, can I?
There's a question there.
So the menopause, now it's setting on a very early age. What is the correct time when we have to approach for this HRT or PHRT? At what age as a precautionary?
Yeah, sure. So it'll have to be tailor made. You will have to visit your gynec or an endocrinologist who's open to the idea of HRT, because again, there is a lot of noise around it. But it'll have to be absolutely tailor made, because they will do a couple of tests on you to understand your metabolic age, as well as understanding how are the hormone levels, including the AMH, FSH, LH, your thyroids, everything, and then take a call on how close are you to menopause. I mean, while the averages are late 30s and early 40s, and you would start, and again, symptoms is another thing. So best way is to listen to your body. So if you are feeling sudden change in your metabolism, if you're feeling sudden hot flushes, night sweats, the common symptoms of perimenopause, so that's the time you should take a call of visiting your gynec. And symptoms can be as vague as frozen shoulders, by the way. So
Got it. Thank you.
There's a question over there.
This is regarding the early adolescence. How would this actually impact the mental health of children, the preparedness, and the future that we are going to see when we are speaking about the early menopause, what happens when there is early adolescence, and what the environmental factors, the nutritious factors are playing.
Yeah, I'm not sure that I can answer that. I don't know what the data is on early adolescence and menarche is in India, but it's accelerating in many parts of the world for sure.
No, so one thing alarming in India typically is PCOS. I
Yeah.
think that is one, which is preventable to a large extent. Uh, but yes, so that is one thing which is like, again, data, I'm sorry, it's fragmented. Some studies say 1 in 5, some studies say 1 in 10 Indian women in reproductive age have PCOS. So now that's a very, and that is much higher, almost double to rest of the global average. So that is one. So obviously exercise, right rhythms, circadian rhythms, good food. This is like basic for longevity, which does not need big gadgets and big medicines. And that I think if we are able to inculcate in the young boys and girls both is going to is the right thing to do.
What about controlling insulin metabolism? I think there's been a lot of research as far as PCOS and insulin
Yeah.
metabolism and
That's
resistance is concerned. Has it come into the clinics? Everything?
So it is there. It is there. And obviously you give, so obviously you're giving metformins there, and metformins have double, triple advantages. So yeah, so obviously detection. So again, that is why I think one game changer that could help us all on a policy making stage is that if we are able to introduce screenings for these metabolic problems early in the age, and even if the policies does not happen, people who are aware can actually get your children to undergo these screenings so that we can pick it up early and we are able to manage it, tackle it earlier.
Yeah, and we didn't really mention gestational diabetes, but this is another major issue. And there's a great study in Singapore, Gusto, that looks at children of women with gestational diabetes and the metabolic problems that they have very early in life. So that's yet another interface between metabolism and fertility that needs a lot more effort and research.
I know time's up, but I think there's just one last question, and we'll take just one more at the back.
Good evening.
Then we can continue the conversation over to you.
Good evening, ma'am. That's a continuation of that question. I'm a dietitian actually. I have a lot of teenage clients like they have these PCOD and PCOS. The mothers are worried about because they're just 13 and 14 early, just the puberty must have started, and there is no regular periods for them. So mothers are worried about that. What be taken step? Like few studies are telling that till 2 years they'll become regular, no need to go for screening and all. Is it the right thing, ma'am, or they should go for the screening?
Do
Go
you have
ahead,
a Singapore
please.
perspective on that?
No, not really.
So see, there is no age set there for screening. Okay, knowing is as important because if you don't know it, what do you treat, right? So that is one perspective. Having said that, obviously, right food supplements. You're a dietitian, so right food, right supplements. Also monitoring the patterns. All that, and uh, because these are teenagers and teenage setting in, that's the time children are also, tend to be very anxious. So mindfulness, heartfulness exercises like that, some breath work, yoga and certain asanas. So it's again a whole complete 360-degree approach for, and if taken earlier, it prevents.
Thank you, ma'am.
So, there's nobody after us. Shall we take the question?
Well, just it's a comment and a question and it's something in between. So one thing I wanted to mention that in the premature ovarian failure, the statistics is very high. 1 in 250 women get the premature ovarian failure, and there is nothing out for them for any type of treatment. In terms of the regenerative therapy, I think 25 years ago, I wrote a commentary in Nature where they did the ooplasmic transfer. So the group of women who they describe as oopased, they transfer the ooplasm from a healthy 22-year-old woman, and the 22 children were born around the world. The problem was, it was very successful. The problem was when I reviewed the paper and we asked the question that, well, mitochondria, there are 5 million mitochondria in the oocyte. When you transfer that, you transfer the mitochondrial DNA from a 22-year-old woman. So you have 3 parents' baby, literally. So that got stopped by FDA in the US after some of the commentary and thing we made. But there are alternative to it. You can transfer the nucleus. But that has, I think, is not in US, but in other countries, for UK, I think they're following it. So, and the other thing we talking to Brian about it, there's no preclinical model per se. You use VCD. So I think there's a lot of things we need to do in this area to get going.
We can have a conference around perimenopause and
Absolutely.
women health.
PCOS.
PCOS.
Since I allowed that question, I'm going to have to let them take another one as well. Can we quick?
So thank you. My question taking a cue from Dr. Brian, what he said that there's development of gestational diabetes. Apart from that, many like Sheehan syndrome or multiple the other disorders also develop after gestation, probably decreasing the fertility in multigravid women. So what is your note? Like it's not about the gestation or pregnancy; it's about the later diseases which develop and affect the longevity of a woman. So what's your take on that? And I'll just pass the mic to my colleague here. So.
Certainly in animal models, what happens in the womb can affect the longevity of the offspring, for sure. There's been a lot of data on mice with that. Even geroprotectors can enhance longevity of the offspring. So there's a lot of information that's transmitted to the offspring. And I think we really haven't dug into that enough to understand it. I think these studies looking at children from gestational diabetes are really informative, and there may be specific interventions that are needed to offset that. And that the prevalence of that's going up everywhere, I think. So it's, there's a lot to be done. I keep saying the same thing. We just haven't funded this research, and so we're giving you more questions than answers.
I guess not in the offspring, but in the mothers who are in that age are again going to face osteoporosis or multiple disorders after getting pregnant. That's my question, basically. Like we are having, I don't know.
Could you repeat?
What's the longevity angle to it? Can you just
Longevity angle for the mother, for example.
the mother? So if she has gestational diabetes, how does it affect her longevity?
Yes, because in case of multigravida women, or having more children, bearing more children, you are susceptible to getting Sheehan syndrome or thyroidism, hypothyroidism.
Yeah. Well, I can just answer generally. There's been a lot of conflicting data about the number of children versus the lifespan of the mother in general. I think you can point to data going in either direction on that, so I think that's still not clear. Now, if you're asking for specific complications that arise during pregnancy and how that might affect longevity, you can imagine deleterious effects, but I don't know of specific studies that have tried to address that.
Final quick question.
Okay. So I wanted to know more about the mechanisms of atherosclerosis and cardiovascular risk in postmenopausal women, and how that differs from, say, studies done in males. Like, do we have adequate models, like ex vivo models, to study that, or has there been sufficient investigation there?
Insufficient investigation.
The answer is insufficient investigation.
Yeah, I mean,
It hasn't been investigated as much. Cardiac continues to be in India the #1 cause of mortality for women as well. But the studies focused on women for cardiac health haven't been done. Having said that, early menopause versus delayed menopause is generally a delayed menopause is cardioprotective because estrogen as a hormone is cardioprotective. So so the entire cardiovascular disease risk, be heart, brain, for both it is. Similarly, Alzheimer's and dementia. So so obviously estrogen has a lot of protective role there. So delaying menopause is just in best interest of all of us.
and I have to say, with respect to animal models, there's a long-standing tradition in the longevity field to look at aging in both sexes. So when we do a lifespan assay, we look at males and females. This does not extend to disease models. What we found a difference in a mTOR regulator in males and females for diabetes study that we did in mice. And so the first thing I did is ask the student, go find the other cases where male and female differences in diabetes progression in a high-fat diet, and we couldn't find female studies. It's remarkable how, for these chronic disease, atherosclerosis, diabetes, even dementia, it's so much done in male animals and not females. So these questions we should have answers to these questions. There should be good models, but in many cases, it's really hard to find cases where they looked at sex-specific differences.
So, as a closing note, till the 70s, women were not allowed to participate in clinical trials. Only after that, we've started including them. And hopefully now, with a lot of cohort studies coming up, we'll have a lot more data to answer all of the questions that were asked today.
And an addendum to that is we need to let older people participate in clinical
Yes,
studies.
exactly. Older people, older women, all of these people need to participate. And the second takeaway from this entire discussion is that the right time to start focusing on your longevity is in utero.
Yeah.
On that note, let's thank all of the panelists.
That was insightful discussion by the panel. Thank you all the panelists.